Okay, let's talk about Japan. This is just an incredible story. A 150-year saga of how this one nation faced total collapse over and over again. And each time it reinvented itself so radically that it ended up reshaping the entire global economy.
So it really all kicks off with this modern-day puzzle. Back in 2016, the Bank of Japan did something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. They introduced negative interest rates. Now, you gotta ask, how did a nation we think of with, ancient traditions and sword-wielding samurai suddenly become the world's boldest financial lab rat? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go way back.
And the answer really is found in this powerful, repeating pattern. It's this cycle of these shocking existential crises that just kept forcing the nation into these radical, all-or-nothing reinventions. It's a theme you'll see again and again.
All right, so let's start with the first great cycle. It all begins in a society that was literally engineered to be perfect and unchanging. I mean, this was a world completely sealed off from outsiders, and it was about to get broken wide open.
So for more than 200 years, Japan lived under this policy called sakoku, or closed country. And look, this wasn't just about closing the borders. No, this was a massive social experiment. The whole goal was to create a perfect, totally stable society, completely insulated from what they saw as the contaminating ideas and the colonial ambitions of the West.
And they were dead serious about it. I mean, think about these rules. You were forbidden to leave on pain of death. If you were a Japanese person abroad, you were forbidden to come back. They banned foreign books. They even outlawed building ships that could handle long voyages. It was, for all intents and purposes, a total cultural and technological quarantine.
But here's the thing. Even inside this perfectly controlled little bubble, a huge paradox was eating away at the system. You had the samurai, right? The elite warrior class, the top of the social ladder. They were paid in fixed amounts of rice. But the economy, well, it was shifting to a cash system. And that meant the merchants, who were officially the lowest social class, were suddenly becoming incredibly wealthy. So you had this bizarre situation where the ruling class was actually going broke.
And then, 1853. The outside world didn't just knock, it kicked the door down with overwhelming force. Commodore Perry's Black Ships, these giant smoke-belching steam-powered warships, sailed right into Edo Bay. And in that moment, Japan had to face a terrifying truth. Those 2 centuries of isolation, it meant they were completely technologically defenseless. Turns out, swords are no match for cannons.
And just look at how fast everything fell apart. It's dizzying. We're talking 15 years. In just 15 years, the entire system that had been in place for centuries just disintegrated. They went from total isolation to signing these humiliating trade deals to political assassinations, and then, finally, a full-blown revolution that wiped out a government that had ruled for 250 years. Just like that.
So this left the samurai class, who made up only about 6% of the population, with an absolutely impossible choice. Option A, cling to your swords, your status, all your ancient privileges, and just watch your nation get carved up and colonized by the West. Or, option B, do something completely and utterly unthinkable. And what they did next is one of the most stunning things you'll ever read in a history book. In an incredible act of collective self-sacrifice, really a kind of class suicide, the samurai chose to save Japan by destroying their own world. They literally voted to abolish their own class, to give up all their privileges. They ended feudalism right then and there, all to build a new, modern nation that could actually stand up for itself.
Okay, so that first reinvention was just astounding. But believe it or not, less than 100 years later, that cycle is going to start all over again. And this time, it's triggered by an even more devastating shock, one that would forge the Japan that we all recognize today.
Fast forward to 1945. After total, unconditional defeat in World War II, Japan wasn't just beaten, it was shattered. I mean, its cities were rebel, literally burned to the ground. Its empire was gone, its people were facing starvation. It was rock bottom. But, just like before, This absolute catastrophe was what set the stage for its most incredible transformation yet.
So the Americans come in, led by General MacArthur, and under the occupation, they systematically dismantled the old Japan. The military, gone. The powerful industrial families, the zaibatsu that fueled the war, broken up. They even did massive land reform, wiping out the old landlord class and creating millions of small, independent farmers. Every single pillar of the old power structure was just torn down.
And the result? Well, it was nothing short of an economic miracle. It got a huge kickstart from American spending during the Korean War, and it was expertly guided by government agencies like the famous MITI. That's the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. And Japan's economy didn't just grow, it exploded. We're talking average annual growth of over 9 or 10% year after year for decades. Just unbelievable numbers.
And out of the ashes of those old zaibatsu came a new kind of structure, the keiretsu. Think of them as these huge families of allied companies, all linked together and usually centered around a powerful main bank. What made them so special was that they combined massive scale with really fierce competition. It turned out to be the perfect recipe for conquering world markets in everything from ships and steel to, of course, cars and consumer electronics.
But, as we're learning in Japan's story, a crisis is never too far off. And this time, in a really ironic twist, it was the nation's own incredible success that planted the seeds of its next disaster, a financial mania that would bring that economic miracle to a screeching halt.
Okay, so here's how it started. There was this big international currency deal called the Plaza Accord. The short version is it made the Japanese yen skyrocket in value. Now, to protect its exporters from that, the Bank of Japan did the logical thing. It slashed interest rates, making money incredibly cheap. And that unleashed a tidal wave of easy credit that fueled what was probably the biggest asset bubble in modern history.
I mean, stocks and real estate prices just went to the moon. It was a total national mania. Get this. At the absolute peak of the bubble, people were saying that the small plot of land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was theoretically worth more than all of the real estate in the entire state of California. That's how crazy it got. The economy had completely lost touch with reality.
So when that bubble finally burst around 1990, the crash was absolutely brutal. But it was so much more than just a financial loss. It was a deep psychological blow to the whole country. It shattered that myth of Japanese economic invincibility, and it ushered in a long period of stagnation that everyone now calls the lost decades.
And this brings us right back to where we started. Full circle, back to that opening riddle. Because how Japan responded to this collapse, the bursting of the bubble, is what forced it to confront its third great crisis, and what turned the entire nation into the world's most important economic laboratory.
See, to fight off this constant threat of deflation, that's when prices keep falling, which just cripples an economy, the Bank of Japan had to get creative. They became pioneers. They invented policies that we all talk about now, like quantitative easing, or QE. Basically, they started creating money out of thin air to buy up government bonds and just flood the frozen financial system with cash.
Then, years later, this whole experimental approach got supercharged under a program called Abenomics. You might have heard of its 3 arrows: more of that monetary easing, huge government spending, and major structural reforms. It was a massive all-in gamble, and it all culminated in 2016 with that policy that once seemed completely unthinkable: negative interest rates.
So think about this journey. From samurai who dismantled their own feudal world to central bankers who are inventing entirely new kinds of money. The whole story of Japan is one of relentless, radical adaptation. And now, as it faces a rapidly aging population and a whole new set of global challenges, the real takeaway is this: the cycle isn't over, not by a long shot. Japan's next great reinvention, it's probably already underway.